Welcome to the Government IT Podcast from Converge One Government Solutions, featuring expert discussions around cloud solutions, cybersecurity, modern workplace, enterprise networking, and customer experience for government and civil agencies. And now, here are your hosts, Ryan Heath and Julia Foster.
Ryan, thanks for joining me again today. Really enjoying our podcast sessions that we're doing. And this week, we're starting something new. We're going to start doing a weekly Weekend Tech episode and try to get those done every week. This week, we're going to start out by talking about Wi-Fi 6E. You know, when we've built websites and applications and things like that in the past, we've run into situations where our clients have applications that they've worked on over a number of years, sometimes 10 years or more, and they piece on all these various pieces over time that serve specific purposes. And what they end up with is what we've always referred to as a duct tape monster. That's kind of, I think, if my understanding is correct, what's happened with the Wi-Fi spectrum to this point in time. Would that be a correct assessment?
Certainly is. I'm kind of looking at it. Even if you look at your own house, your own home office. I just went on my wireless network and I got 36 devices now. So first put that in, it was for a laptop and maybe a phone, so 2, 3, 4 devices. Now 36, and had no idea I was even close to that.
So then my understanding of what's great about 6E is that we have this whole new section of spectrum that's opened up, but it's wireless first, and it's dedicated specifically to devices that are made for this part of the spectrum. So there's not going to be any overlap or performance degradation from older devices, 4s and 5s, and there's going to be a lot more security, as I understand it, as well, because there are new security requirements and specifications. But then also because we're not sharing the spectrum with legacy devices, we're not bringing in any kind of security vulnerabilities that come with those technologies. Is that correct?
Correct. I mean, you first just look at the overlapping piece. So 2.4 had 3 non-overlapping channels. So you're basically, 3 devices streaming at once. And then they would kind of go on and off and share that, different channels. And, that increased with 5, but now with, 6E, you're getting 5 times that amount of 5. So was it 10 or 12 times more of, 2.4. And each one of those channels has I think 80 megahertz, band. So you're stacking up a lot of different, channel options. I think 14 total that are kind of dedicated within that big giant span of 80 megahertz. So it's a big increase of spectrum use. 2.4, I think, was a spectrum range of 100. Now 6E is 1200. So right there, 1200 more megahertz of spectrum range right there. A lot less collisions and, channel capacity issues.
So my understanding then is also, obviously this is going to come with a lot of increased capacity and throughput. So that's going to facilitate a lot of the modern technologies and use cases that we, have, such as the Internet of Things with multiple devices accessing the networks, as you put it earlier. Also, augmented reality and virtual reality, remote learning, telehealth. What are some of the other benefits and use cases that you think would be worth mentioning or talking about?
All those are really good points. You can even kind of bring in just the large meeting spaces that we have in a lot of facilities. If it's, boardroom style or just kind of the meeting spaces in general, where, you're looking at everyone bringing in laptops or a tablet or a phone, so 2 to 3 devices per individual. You start stacking up, 30 people in a meeting. That's now 90 devices just in one small, little room. So, having more capacity, being able to penetrate that type of facility definitely helps.
So my understanding, also speaking of, penetrating barriers, is that there will be greater capability for penetrating obstacles, physical obstacles. Is that understanding correct? And why would that be?
Kind of. So, within this frequency range, it's a higher range. So it doesn't go as far as, say, 2.4. But what it does is has less interference. So with that less interference, it's going to kind of keep on going. You'll have a lot more, spectrum to use. So therefore, theoretically, it should kind of penetrate around the walls a little bit better instead of just stopping based on devices and, the reach that it's going to have.
Actually, because of the decreased interference, it's going to go farther.
Yeah, you'll have, especially in an office space, you'll have a lot better kind of penetration around devices because you have that broad spectrum.
So, we talked about the use case of, larger venues, concert halls, conference centers, things like that. What are some of the other facilities or use cases that you could see this being really useful in?
I mean, I really kind of just see it at this point, just standard office space. Now everyone is getting laptops as kind of the number one priority, especially with the work from home environment that we've been in the last few years of, kind of bringing that device back home, back and forth. So if everyone's got a wireless device instead of the old PC setup where you're hardwired in, just your standard cubicle farm or, your office space that's fairly open, one of these devices will easily penetrate all those users. Still would highly recommend doing heat maps to make sure you got the coverage. But, now that kind of green dot you would have on a heat map, previously didn't really say how many devices that you were going to have within that certain area.
Mhm.
Now we can start loading up those devices. So you wouldn't have to kind of do a retroactive heat map after it's kind of been deployed to see, okay, well, where do we need to add APs now to have the coverage that it needs, not just the heat map signature.
And so, yeah, and another analogy that I thought of was, again, looking back at, developing websites and applications, there was this shift, especially between like 2010 and 2015, I would say, where everything had to be converted to be mobile compatible, right? So we started making everything responsive, so that at smaller screen sizes, things would, lay out properly within the context of that smaller screen. But then, as quickly as possible, we made the shift to mobile first, because that was, that's where all the traffic was coming from. So we wanted to make sure that everything that was being developed was appealing to that largest segment first, and then compatible with everything after that. So it became more desktop compatible and mobile first. It sounds like that's precisely what's happening here with 6E, is that we've made this shift over the decades, because the spectrum was previously apportioned sort of on an ad hoc basis. Now there's this giant chunk of spectrum that's being given, for use, and it's wireless first, instead of, sort of this transitional use where it's going from a wired world to a wireless world. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, if you just look at trying to order a computer these days, just a standard laptop, if you want an Ethernet port, you have to add that dongle or the adapter to it. Now, there's some facilities that we're in where you can't have any USB adapters to it. So if it's not built in, theoretically, you're not supposed to be able to use that device. And, everything that I've, kind of gone through ordering and looking at lately, it's all wireless. There really is. It's really hard to find now an Ethernet enabled device. So it really kind of narrows down your ability to purchase.
Yeah, it's really funny. Just yesterday, I was having some issues with my internet connection at home, and I was dealing with our ISP, and they said, we did a speed test, and the speed was not as high as it should have been. So they said, could you plug it into Ethernet? And I'm like, it's 2023. I don't have an Ethernet cable handy. I'm sorry. So yeah, to your point, everything is, certainly wired. Being wired is like the exception now, right?
Yeah. So, just kind of looking at putting a new device into play, all you really need at this point is just the power. Previously, you would need to know where the network jack was going to be. Do you need to hire a cabling vendor to put a network jack there? Does your switch in the back end have capacity? All those kind of different things. Now you don't have to worry about that. The capacity should be there from the 6E perspective to throw all the devices into play.
And who are some of the top vendors that are at play in this right now?
I'm looking really at Cisco, Juniper, Aruba would be the kind of the top three manufacturers in play. All the code makers or the chip makers in play as well. So you got Broadcom as an example. All their kind of chips now are moving into that 6E category.
Well, that leads me to I guess sort of like a two-part question. How can C1 Gov, how can Converge One Government Solutions help customers leverage this new technology? And I guess as an extension to that, or maybe a different way of putting it is, how can you work with your customers to prepare them for this shift?
Well, I see it as something that they need to start at a minimum planning for. Even if they don't have it on their radar today, it's something that they need to start planning for in the next year to 2 years to start getting the funding to be able to pay for the updated and upgraded, wireless infrastructure. So, that's going to be a site survey, doing heat maps, making sure that, what is currently there, what is working, what's not working, and really looking at the security aspect of it too. So putting WPA3 into play, that right there, just the security aspect should be the leading factor besides the capacity of 6E.
Yeah, and it makes me think of, when it comes to any kind of project, whether it's networking or some kind of development project, certainly the lessons that one of the primary or most important lessons I've learned over the years is that pre-production is everything. All the planning that you do ahead of time will make the difference in the success or failure of an endeavor. And this leads me to think about, the episodes that we've done recently about TDM migrations and migrating, to modern routing switching networks, that if you plan ahead of time, you have a lot more in your control. It's sort of, you're doing it on your own time frame. You have, say in what goes down and how and when. Whereas if you, kind of wait too late, then you're kind of under the gun and it gets a little messy, right?
Correct. Because the worst thing about something like this is, a project is going to be put in place, some new technology is going to come in, a big purchase is going to be acquired, and then all of a sudden they put it out and they're like, oh, it doesn't work because we don't have, 6E enabled and all the security requirements that are needed for that. So it's, we got to put in infrastructure first to be able to support all the new and upcoming technologies that are going to be put in play on a day-to-day use. So you need your plumbing, and this would be part of that plumbing.
That's a good way of putting it. I like that. So I can imagine that, one of the greatest considerations here, in terms of implementing new technologies that are going to require 6E, migrating infrastructure to facilitate 6E, is we already talked a little bit about it, but certainly security is going to be, especially in, Fed SLED, is going to be the probably the number one concern, right? Besides cost.
Correct. I mean, cybersecurity in general is a very big point right now to kind of discuss and really think through on the network. So with 6E in play now, we're talking about stronger encryption, improved authentication, kind of protection against brute force attacks, a little bit easier to configure. So that's also a big issue that I've seen lately. It's just configurations haven't been there that really need to be put there and applied on the overall security aspect. And it also has protection for open networks as well. So that's an added benefit that you would see.
Sounds like there's a lot to talk about when it comes to security. So I think what we'll do is, we'll stop here for today. And in next week's episode, we'll talk in greater depth about, 6E security considerations. How's that sound?
That sounds great. Good idea.
So, when it comes to consulting with C1Gov on, migration strategies and things like that, we'll put some links in the description below, as we always do, in terms of how you can contact Ryan and C1 Government Solutions and get the ball rolling on that. Thanks for your time today, and we'll see everybody next time.
Appreciate it. Thank you, guys.